Okay. Yeah, but it's like my cheeks are all red and I had a hat on, so but I'm warming
Mhm.
up. But
So,
yes, it's chilly
so how
here and
how
you're
how cold are you talking?
um about well above freezing. Like we had a couple of frosty nights, but we don't really
Yeah.
freeze. I have some frost damage on some plants. Um,
Yeah.
but it's just been consistently colder than normal for like a long time.
Okay.
And then we're
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
overcast, and so we usually have a lot of sunshine. So when it's overcast
Ah,
and a little bit cool, everybody's like, it's the
what's going on?
Arctic.
This is Florida. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so let's look, and we're looking at Stitch.
Stitch. Yeah.
How's he doing?
Yeah, not bad. It's slowly, slowly. This video doesn't look that great. But the previous session I had before this one, which I'd actually also recorded and then somehow deleted it accidentally on my phone and it
Oh,
got lost forever. But that's okay.
I hate that.
I know, because the previous session he was really I had quite a few things to kind of show you, but he was initially very um he was very a little bit up and a little bit, it's like we were arguing. That's how I felt. Like everything, we weren't on the same page. He was going around like trying to pull the reins from me, and it just felt like a big argument to begin with.
Argy
Anyway, then
bargy.
he kind of settled down. Argy bargy, yeah. Then he settled down a little bit. And then when we were doing his preferred side, which is going to the left, sorry, my puppies are coming and making noise. Shush. He was going really good. Like if you just saw that section, you'd think, wow, he's ready to ride. But obviously the other way around is not as good. But then this session, he was a bit not very forward, so maybe he wasn't feeling great. I don't know. So anyway,
Well,
you'll see.
I
He's
kind of
also
I went right back to the beginning because I really loved how he started this session. And I was going to ask you if this has been his new normal because with the
this,
holidays and everything, I haven't seen him in a while.
yeah, no, he started off this session really like in a good frame of mind, I felt.
Hmm.
Like he wasn't arguing because initially sometimes the first few laps, it's like he has a bit of an argument about the whole thing.
Hmm. And
But
that's
this time
just,
he was very
yeah, he's
happy.
starting off fantastic. I love
Mm.
that first down that side of the arena is
Hmm.
really lovely. And what's like the first couple things I noticed is his walk is rhythmic and on the energetic side, but not anxious. So he looks very
Yeah.
calm. He looks forward.
Hmm.
He's got a really lovely rhythm, and his neck is starting to not look so like a cresty neck. It's starting to
Yes.
find some length.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
I'm
that's the
also trying to slim him down a bit as well. Hopefully that will help matters. I
yeah.
know that part of it's obviously how he's holding in the neck, but
Well, what happens
yeah, I think
when they drop the back, right? And that's how he was ridden. That's why his hindquarters are weak.
mm,
That's why he was so snarky. That's why he has a cresty neck. It's why he was
hmm
attacking you, right? So all
hmm
of it is when the back drops, the croup sort of gets really flat across the top, right? And he has that
yeah,
sort of flatness. And then the neck
hmm
gets really cresty because if you think of from the back of the skull all the way to the tail, all those top line muscles that support the spine and the pelvis are all interconnected soft tissues, tendon, ligament, and muscle, right? And
hmm
when the back drops, that whole top line goes into the concentric contraction, the shortening contraction, right?
hmm
And
yep,
this is also going to kind of answer the question of the argy-bargy moments because he's been there a long time. So it's like if you were, a bodybuilder and you're like this all the time, the muscles just take on a chronic shortening contraction. And
yes,
what that's really reflecting is an unstable axial skeleton. So the axial skeleton of the skull, spine, and pelvis, the midline of the body, as soon as it is too mobile, that's what happens, right? All those muscles
Yeah.
shorten
Yeah.
and contract. So it kind of makes them look like they're squished and short. Like they get this kind of
Yes.
squishy neck and they just look really compact, but they're not
Yeah.
happy. Whether they're,
Bodybuilder look.
yeah, and whether they're anxious or tense, they're just not happy. And
Yeah.
and so he sort of took on the defensive strategy called fight, but he was
Mm-hmm.
protecting that chronic discomfort. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is the most unwound I have seen him, like moving back to a
Mm.
healthy use of his body, because
Yep.
when they, as they stabilize, and it really only has to be stability with alignment and rotation, the left to right stability of the skull and the spine and the pelvis, at least
Mm-hmm.
gets them out of the shortening contraction. And it happens, you can think of it as at the same rate. So let's say he was super tight in the muscles, which meant he
Mm-hmm.
was very unstable in the axial skeleton. And long
Mm-hmm.
reining addresses that directly. That's what you've been doing
Yeah.
is stabilizing the axial skeleton left to right. So
Yeah.
as the skeleton gets more stable, the muscles release contraction. And he's
Mm-hmm.
right about at this place where he's going to tip it the other way.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And he's kind of close. He's right about here because I can see his neck doesn't look like it has those we think it's fat, but it's really tension when they get the cresty neck,
Mm.
right? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
he's loosening up that really cresty neck little by little, and his whole body
Mm-hmm.
appearance has gone from this to sort of this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we have a toy in America we call Stretch Armstrong, and he's kind of a rubbery toy. You can stretch him out and squish him together. And it's like
Yeah.
he's sort of stretching out nose to tail. And that tells you he hasn't fully stabilized the skull, spine, and pelvis to the point that he can really maintain long and low, even. Um, so that's still a work in progress, but probably
Yeah.
when you feel him rip the reins really fast,
Mm-hmm.
that's the transition. And it
Yes.
comes
Okay.
it comes out in fits and starts, and we think that they're trying to fight us. And it's just that as soon as the axial skeleton hits that threshold of stability, it's an instant muscle release. And so
Yeah. Okay.
it kind of
Yep.
happens fast and hard. And what they do is they root. So it's like they're pushing on the bit.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And they snatch we call it snatching the bit. We call it rooting on the bit. We call it,
Yep.
hating the bit. We say all these things, but it really is internally just this muscle use transition. And it comes at first sort of dramatically, and then it gets a little gentler. So
Okay.
I don't
Yep.
mind if he starts snatching the bit. What that tells you is where he started like this, he's now
Yep.
kind of here, and when he every time he snatches the bit, he's sort of boom like that, and sort
Yes.
of
Okay.
shifting
Yep.
into that other muscle use. And then he'll go,
Yep.
oh, I don't feel stable here, and he'll shorten his neck again. And so
Yep.
right where you're at is sort of that transition between skeletal stability and muscular stability. And
Mm-hmm.
so you don't change what you're doing, but don't feel bad about the days that you feel like you're in an argument because he's probably just
Okay.
exploring. Like
Yeah.
he
Okay.
he
Yep.
can't help it, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
and it's kind of like we looked at last time, those shoulder clunks. It's like
Yes.
when the
Yeah. And
when
I've
the
noticed quite a few of those.
yeah. And that's what
Yep.
happens when the body starts to really make some deep internal changes. It comes out in fits and starts. It's, kind of like
Mm-hmm.
the car backfiring and sort of getting running again.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah, good
it,
analogy.
yeah. And that's exactly what he's doing because this whole video, he's as focused on the work as I've ever seen him. And what that tells me is like his distractions aren't coming with the same level of energy that they used to.
Mm.
He
Hmm.
looks, but he doesn't get tight. He looks,
Yes.
but he
Yep.
doesn't get anxious. And it's easier to get his mind back on the job than ever before. And would you say that's pretty
Hmm.
consistent?
Um, Most of the time, he still has, um, yeah, he still has days where he might be a little bit up, and especially if the ponies are running around or if there's something happening and whatnot, it just escalates him a little bit.
Yeah.
So it feels like the minute he gets any level of excitement, he he goes into the looking around and whatnot,
Yes. Yes.
which I
And
suppose is
so
probably
and
quite
all
normal,
that
isn't it?
is like if we look at if we drew a straight line and we said one defensiveness is fight, but the
Hmm.
opposite expression of defensiveness is flight.
Yeah,
And what he's done slowly, because when we started, his preferred defensive strategy was fight. And
yeah.
when you see distraction and anxiety, or they start to voluntarily speed up a bit, all that is
Hmm.
sort of a jump. It's like a
Yes, to the other
bounce
side.
to the other
Yep.
side. And that
Yep.
is absolutely normal in the process
Hmm.
of reducing stress. It's not resolved yet, right? Because he's still
Yep.
dealing with
Yep.
some comfort issues and coordination. But
Hmm.
every time he sort of, when you see the behavior change between tension and snarky and then
Hmm.
anxious, and then it'll go back to a little bit of tension. But every time he sort of switches, it's further reducing this sort of habitual stress that he's been internalizing for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a
And
lot to unwind with him.
yeah, and his stress is not related to, with you, it's not related to how he's been handled, although he tells us he's been handled a bit rough in the past. Um,
Mm.
but it can also be related to just living with chronic discomfort. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's where the horse industry as a whole doesn't really understand horse comfort from a coordination point of view. We're looking for the
No.
wrong thing. So
Yeah.
and so everybody who tried to help him just made it worse because we're kind
Yeah.
of looking at the
Yeah.
wrong things.
Exactly. It's really interesting. I was listening to, so I've listened to all of your podcasts pretty well, and I know that you talk about how using trot poles or cavalettis for like building balance and straightness is not the way to go because it's not helping the skeleton. It's moving the legs too much, basically, I suppose. And I was listening to another, oh, well, I obviously won't name them, but listening to another podcast the other day and it's like on balance and they're talking about using cavalettis and trot poles and it's like oh god like it's just really confusing.
Yeah.
I mean I'm all for
No, it's very
your method but you can see
contradictory.
how
And I I
yeah
I have a book that I used for years by Reiner Klimke on ground poles and cavalettis and gymnasticizing and all of that is
yeah
well and good until we've entered the place of what I consider rehab. I go,
yeah
I go maybe for a healthy horse that's more appropriate. But
mm-hmm.
once we have behavioral issues or movement issues, what nobody's factoring in is they're looking at leg movement and head and neck movement. And it's no different than
Yeah.
telling riders, like we do it to people too. When we say shoulders back, heels down, look where you're going. It's like
Mm.
we're missing the main support system of the body's balance, which is the skull, spine, and pelvis. And so
Yeah.
nobody who's doing ground pulls, they're looking at the bendiness of the legs. But
Yeah.
if the legs bend and the back is dropped, you do damage. And
Yeah.
if the legs bend more because the back is lift, then you strengthen. But nobody's making that
Yes.
differentiation about it. They're
No,
just,
no. So they're missing the first part of it.
yeah, nobody's looking at how is the middle of the skeleton functioning while you're doing whatever you're doing. And if I can see the axial skeleton is stable over ground poles, I'm not saying they wouldn't be beneficial, right? But vets and
Yeah, yeah,
trainers
yeah.
they don't say, look at the midline, look at the pelvis. They're just saying do ground pulls, right? And I
Yes,
go,
yeah,
that sort of depends. It's like telling everybody on the planet you should be jogging for 30 minutes a day.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I go, not
Well, I can
everybody.
only imagine if I attempted to use trot poles or cavalettis on my two horses, that would just be disastrous.
Yeah, because they're
Well, they
not.
wouldn't even go over them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And his
Yeah.
movement, like even sort of what we've talked about with the risk to his suspensory and the little bit of
Mm.
toe dragging or the drop through the fetlock, if you added speed and obstacles to what's already going on, you're just going to break them down faster.
Yeah, yeah,
I go, so that's
yeah.
the problem is once the pattern or the habit of movement of coordination is in the nervous system, if you don't change that, then every time you increase force, whether it's speed or impact, I go, you're just taking more and more away from the health of the body.
hmm
And
Yeah,
so that's
yeah.
why the long reins, like, and the horses always tell me too. I go, they're happier on the long reins and they resist the trot poles. I go, they're
Yeah,
smarter
yeah,
than most humans. So
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I've got a question about backing up. Is backing up on the long reins beneficial at all, or it depends, or not at all?
it kind of depends on how, right? So
Yeah.
it can be a really beneficial exercise if you don't rush them or you don't hurry them.
hmm
And if they really
hmm
resist it, because I do have a couple videos on the YouTube channel, and I think I put them in our group as well on how to ask them to back up that is the most
hmm
mechanically beneficial, and it's pretty specific.
Okay.
And it's
Yep.
actually better not on the long reins if you want to play with backup. It's better if you stand in front of them because what I do to ask them to back up is I put my hand between the front legs and I ask the pectoral muscles, which is the whole thoracic sling, to go
hmm
straight up.
Okay.
And what
Yep.
what they do is sometimes instead of pushing up through the front legs, they end up backing up. But what I really want to teach them is that upward direction of force because sometimes they forget that.
Lifting it.
hmm
Yeah, okay.
So
Yeah.
that can be
All
really
right, that's good to
beneficial.
know.
And on the long
Yep.
reins, it kind of turns into a little bit of a backwards direction. And they may
Yes.
they may step backwards while they're still really pushing forward. So I don't tend to do it on the long reins. It wouldn't hurt anything,
Okay.
especially
Yeah.
because you're patient and you're working with feel. But
Yeah.
if you can't find them, let me know and I'll send you the link for those two videos I did, one from the saddle and one from the ground.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And
Yeah,
they're
Pablo offers it very easy. I haven't actually tried it with Stitch, but the other day we'd finished the session, but I'd gone past my lead rope, so I just asked him to back up, and he's very responsive on it, but I didn't know yeah, I didn't know, is it beneficial or not so much?
Well, there's two ways because if you need him to physically move away from something, it doesn't matter how he backs up. So
Yeah.
there's sort of the can you even go that direction element. But
hmm
what I show is if you want to use it as part of rehab, then there's a specific way to do it.
One to use. Okay. Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, good to
Yeah,
know.
if you're
Yeah.
just using it to say, "Hey, don't step on my foot," then there's a whole different reason.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So with Stitches sessions, now I'm trying to do more squares down this end of the arena just to get some more turns in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, hopefully we'll then obviously be able to do like more circles. And like the previous session I had prior to this one, he was going around this direction on a circle for probably about 10 minutes at a really good pace. Like he just looked
Right.
fantastic. I thought, well, look at that. And now we get to today and it's like, oh, okay.
Don't worry about
We're
it.
not
It'll,
going anywhere.
and that
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
that
That's all part
really,
of it, isn't it?
well, what it tells you is when you get a really good day and then you have a day where you feel like you're back at the beginning a little, um,
Mhm.
it just tells you that the body's adapting. That's all.
Yeah,
A-
yeah.
And and the good day, it shows you that all of this slogging and repetition is paying off. Like you get a
Hmm.
sneaky peek of what's to come, and then they sort of take
Yeah.
away. And then you get
Yeah,
another
yeah,
sneaky peek. But as the
yeah.
body adapts, those moments or those days start to come more frequently. So
Hmm.
it's not really an all at once kind of process. It's just a
No.
gradual reconditioning of the body. And everything I'm
Yeah.
seeing in this video, if this is not your best day, it is still a huge amount of progress since the last time I saw him. Things are coming
Hmm.
together for Stitch.
Yeah. He's a cute boy.
Hmm.
You can't see it at the moment, but he's covered in big welts. Because I had him clipped. Because he just didn't seem to lose his winter coat this time. And the insects got him overnight, and he's got
Uh,
massive big welts all over him, poor thing. So that he was also a bit itchy and a bit peeved off, I think, at
One
times.
of the things that keeps catching my eye when he's moving is his hind legs don't look so narrow. He's beginning to look a little bit
Mhm.
wider, both between the hind legs and the front legs. Are you noticing that he's not standing with his feet quite as close together most of the time?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have noticed that it's a bit wider. I probably pay more attention to Pablo in that space, but I should notice Stitch as well. But Pablo is really either close like that or sometimes he steps out.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Whereas Stitch kind of even when Stitch is standing in the paddock, his it's probably not perfect, but his are a little bit wider than Pablo's.
Pay attention to it just a little because he looks like the thing that concerned me in past lessons that we've talked about is that his hocks look kind of arthritic, which was really putting a lot of too much drop through the fetlock, which is
Mm-hmm.
risky for the suspensories. And I'm seeing the fetlocks and suspensories tighten up and just
Okay.
like a tiny bit less of that lateral movement through the hocks. The hocks look more stable. And instead of
Mm-hmm.
sort of like when he used to walk, we can look back at some videos, but it was like his hocks kind of came to the midline with every step.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'm
Yeah, yeah.
seeing a lot less of that. So his hind legs are
Oh.
tracking straighter and he's kind of
Yeah.
keeping them wider.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that is,
Which is less, that's because of less rotation, yeah?
yeah, that, well, it's a sign, it's a result of more pelvic engagement. So
Mm-hmm.
even though we can't see the whole posture change a lot yet, we're seeing more
Mm-hmm.
length. We're seeing him uncurl the neck. We're seeing him sort of widen the legs and track a little bit straighter and more stable. And all of those are signs that the axial skeleton, and especially the pelvis for him, is getting more stable. So when we see a lot of movement in the pelvic bones, the legs sort of have to take over the role of stability. And so they just do all kinds of weird things that stress out the
Yeah.
joints.
Yeah.
But I think this is the best down here that his fetlocks have looked. Like they're still dropping more than I
Okay.
would like to see. But as
Yeah.
some of his earlier videos, I was sort of, biting my nails, hoping he didn't, blow up.
Hurt himself.
If he had a big runaround or hoo-ha, he was in a place where he could have easily strained a suspensory. And
Yeah,
now
yeah, yeah.
it's looking tighter on those hind legs
Mm-hmm.
and a lot less
Mm-hmm.
dropping through the fetlock.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, and I mean he is about as cooperative as I've seen him too. Like he's getting
Hmm.
more he's more sort of all business and less are we done yet?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, far less looking over at the boogeyman in the bush
Yes.
and focusing on everything else but what we're doing. Yeah, yeah, he's doing well.
Yeah, and I don't know, like he probably wasn't as opinionated maybe as Pablo was from the time he was young. Stitch kind of makes me think he was a horse who tried his best to cooperate until he couldn't. And
Yeah,
his body is just as complicated as Pablo's, but Pablo would have none of it. He let the whole world know that
yeah.
things were not working. Where
Yes,
I think
yeah.
I think Stitch coped with it a little bit longer, so in some ways he's
Mm.
not quite as straightforward as Pablo. I
Mm.
mean both of them,
Yeah,
both of them have their issues, but it's like if I look at a horse like a puzzle in rehab, I go, Pablo's kind of like one of those children's puzzles with big chunky pieces. And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and Stitch is more like one of those 1,000-piece puzzles. Just a
Right. Yeah.
little more to kind of put to get back together.
Yes, yeah. And because I got him as a 13 or 14-year-old, I think.
Mm.
13-year-old. He's now 16 or 17.
Hmm.
So he'd been ridden for quite a while, obviously, his whole
Yeah.
until 13. And the story I got when I bought him was he just wasn't settled in with his he didn't like his adjustment center. Wasn't settled. And I kind of think back now, I'm thinking, okay, well, it was the kissing spine potentially, and then that was all going a bit pear-shaped, and he was just pushed on to do, not, no
Yeah.
disrespect to the person doing it, they didn't know, but yeah, pushed on, and then obviously everything got really uncomfortable for him, and yeah,
Yeah.
so
And
here we are.
when you took him, because it happens to a lot of people, and then people blame themselves or other people blame you. But his sort of snarkiness with you and where he had gotten was because he finally felt safe with you. Like
Yeah,
in
he
a
could have an
weird,
opinion.
he could have an opinion. And so it's like
Mm.
you get to hear about his whole life and how that will never happen again because he finally,
Yeah,
has a
yeah,
home
yeah,
where he feels safe. And so many
yeah,
people beat themselves up because they thought they bought a good horse, and then the horse starts to unravel because they feel safe. And it's like,
yeah,
you didn't ruin the horse. This is what you got. And the horse, what you
yeah.
did was you helped the horse feel safe and comfortable. And now
Mm.
all those opinions that have been stuffed inside need to come out.
Yeah, and for years I always thought that um, whatever horse I ended up with, that the fact that they have opinions, I thought that was a bad thing. I thought that I'm doing something wrong because they're coming at me with their opinions, when now I realize actually it's not such a bad thing because I've allowed them to, express it, and
Yeah.
hopefully we get to the bottom of it and
It's
whatnot. Yeah.
actually a great thing. And when that happens, I'm sure it happened to you, some professional
Oh, plenty of
or
them.
or friend, right? Helpful friend, um,
Yeah.
comes and tells you, and this is the line that just grates on my every last nerve. Your horse doesn't respect you.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I
Yeah,
go,
had all that.
oh
Had
my
all that.
God, I just like that makes
Yeah.
me want to slap somebody into next week. I just go
Yeah.
that,
Well, next time I will.
yeah. Because it's
And it's
like it's
funny,
the
but
opposite. That horse finally feels safe with you enough to share an opinion, and people tell
yeah,
you, "Oh, he disrespects you." It just drives me
yeah.
nuts.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, from the majority, I mean, I have had some really good trainers as well. We just are on a different path, but some of the trainers I've had, and I've gone through many, many. So I've had Pablo since he was a 2-year-old, and he's now 11. And I've always had a trainer in the mix trying to progress something or other. So I've had quite a few, but the majority of them were from the traditional mindset where the horse needs to be obedient and behave itself and just you don't have opinions.
Yeah.
So we have just gone around and around and around and around. So yeah, here we
Yeah.
are. We've
No,
come out
and
that mess.
yeah. Yeah. No, and my little Arabian mare Prima would have none of it from day one. And it's
Mm.
like you could get her to do a lot of things and she was gentle and kind, but man, did she let you know when your idea was a dumb one. She was
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
I had mentors tell me, "Oh, well, after all, she's just an Arabian mare." And I go,
Yeah.
"No, something's wrong. Something's
Yeah.
not right." So
Yeah.
this is as stable as I have seen his hind legs. That is the one thing that the length of his body, his neck starting
Mm-hmm.
to uncurl. So that sort of soft length he's gaining, the amount of
Mm-hmm.
the amount of voluntary calm attention is a significant increase
Mm.
of percentage of time in his session.
Yes. Yeah.
And and then the hind legs look finally like they're beginning to feel comfortable to him, which is
Mm-hmm.
huge. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and if he'll hold 10 minutes on a circle, like on the days he can do it because it's going to
Mm.
speed up his progress more. And
Yeah.
like you could not work this horse too long on the circle, let's put it that way. And
Mm-hmm.
so any days he's willing to do a circle, do it, and just know that might not happen again for another week or six
Yeah.
sessions,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have this, ground driving as a baseline. We know that's going to work. And you may find once a week he can do almost the entire session on a circle, and then he can't even do one circle for like another week or 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, stay
Yeah. That
on
makes
your work
sense.
schedule,
Yep.
and just keep adapting because he finally looks stable enough that it doesn't surprise me that you're getting a day where he could stay on the circle for 5 or 10 minutes. That's huge.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I try and do it 3 or 4 times a week for half hour at a time. So
Oops.
hopefully that will help build it up. I do have a question actually. So you know how I said with Pablo last time I've been putting the bareback pad on him just so that it simulates a saddle, I
Oh,
suppose, so he just gets used to having oop, the girth on and
sorry. Let
everything
me
else.
stop that.
Um,
YouTube
you're
went
right.
off on a
You're
tangent.
right. Okay. A
So
big
sorry,
cat
say
sitting
that
there
again.
listening.
I know it's
Um, yeah, she's cute. So you know how with Pablo I've been using the bareback pad on him just
uh-huh.
so he gets to the stepping stone, I suppose, before the saddle. I tried it on Stitch the other day, and I don't know whether it's because he's been clipped. Um, sorry, my dog's going crazy. Because he's been clipped. It was like it was irritating him so much that he couldn't even focus. He was itchy. And I didn't know whether is that because he's clipped? It could be. Have you ever noticed that with clipped horses and their saddle blankets?
So the two reasons, if they're sort of crawling out of their skin, itchy with either a saddle pad or the bareback pad, the only two
Yeah,
reasons I've seen is one because they're clipped, or two,
yeah.
if some horses develop or have unknown allergies to wool.
Okay,
And
okay.
and I know you haven't had anything on his back for a while, right?
No, no, nothing.
And you said the bugs like him and he welts up if the bugs get him.
He does. He
So
gets
does your
he's
bareback pad
got allergies.
have wool on the bottom?
No, but so I put a saddle blanket under it, and it's just more like a cotton one, I think, like a padded cotton.
Okay. Because I was going to say
Yeah,
if it's a cotton wool blend or it has any wool in it, just put a cotton pad between that. And
yeah.
if he had just been clipped, he could be sensitive from that. So just try it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
if it continues, like I don't, it's possible that it's related to his memory of pain related to kissing spine because
Mm.
it's going to be a trigger to his nervous system
Yeah.
from, the last
Yeah.
time he wore tack, he had kissing
Yes.
spine. Um,
Hmm.
so if it continue, I would do it every time.
Okay.
Put the cotton pad on it. Um, and how long ago did you clip him?
Just before Christmas.
Oh yeah, he should be fine. So usually it's
Mm.
only a day, maybe 2 days. They're a little prickly if you tack them up
Yeah,
right after you
okay.
clip them, but it's not longer than a day or two. And
Oh,
so,
yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's not the clipping then. It's probably
Right,
just
okay.
a little bit of a nervous system trigger for him because
Yeah.
it's like it's
Yeah, not an enjoyable memory for him having that on, is it?
right. Or for Pablo, which is why you're doing it for Pablo
Yeah.
too. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
how you work through those things is that's why I'm saying put it on every time if you have time
Hmm.
because they need to have they need to have a realization that they don't
Yeah.
feel the same way they used to with the same trigger.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because the trigger is sort of just setting off a cascade of nervous system responses, right? It's
Hmm.
kind of unconscious. And
Yeah.
so if he's fussy with it and he was clipped that long ago, I would say it's either an allergy or a memory. And
Hmm.
if it's an allergy, it will continue. It won't get better. And
Yeah, yeah.
if it's a memory, it may take a dozen times for him to finally relax, but he'll get a little bit
Yeah.
more relaxed each time.
Yeah. 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 And I do have a few different saddle blankets as well, so I could just try a few, not the
Hmm.
wool ones, but the other types. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because he might
Yeah.
prefer felt. He might want something more cushy. He might want a different, I don't know. You
Mm.
can play with the equipment that you have. Don't go out and buy
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. 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 No. I'm not buying anything else ever again for my horses, ever.
I know, right? Okay, I think I got the screen back up. So I just want to, I'll have to catch it. Once it hits, YouTube changed something because it used to stop at the end of the video. And now it like
Yeah.
goes instantly into commercials and you can't get back to it. It's like it's
Yeah.
trickier.
Yeah.
But
They're onto it. That's why.
yeah, I still love how he starts off. I
He
love that
looks nice, doesn't he?
yeah, yeah. He's starting to look like a healthy horse again and not sort
Mm.
of either anxious or tense, right? So it's like
Hmm.
I look at balance is always a middle place. And in the process of reducing stress and changing coordination, you still get these highs and lows on either side of the scale. Just like we talked
Hmm.
about that same transition of skeletal stability from muscular stability, you go through those same kind of adjustment periods. And that's the
Yeah.
ungraceful part. It's just
Yeah.
not, they all do it different. It's just not graceful.
Hmm.
But when you start
Yeah.
to see those sort of changes, um, balance is always an equalization. And when you equalize things, you also reduce, right? You reduce
Hmm.
force. So what happens is the highs are not as high, but they're still there, right?
Yeah.
So we're kind of moving towards an equalization. You can think of it that way. And then when you have a
Hmm.
day that feels kind of argy-bargy, you just go, ah, he must be changing.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I do. I have to remind myself that progress is not linear, and that you just go around in circles a bit, but hopefully on the up.
Yes. Yeah, and you can
Yeah.
see it for yourself. Like when I pointed it out, I
Mm.
think this video, I would say this horse is focused in like on what he's feeling and what he's doing like
Mm.
90% of the time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that
Which
used to,
he's never been like that.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the signs that always keeps me on track is long before you can really see obvious physical changes in movement or physical development, the behavior,
Hmm.
like the reduction of tension and anxiety, and more moments of being in sort of a calm, cooperative state, that always tells me I'm getting the body right.
Hmm.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It does.
Yeah, and he wasn't keen on the circles today, but you can tell he's definitely more comfortable when you put him on a circle. He's not getting stuck. He's not shutting down, sort of going, I just can't, right? He
Hmm.
hesitates. He stops. He thinks it's a little difficult, and he hesitates, but he's so much easier to get him to move forward than I've ever seen in his videos so far.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
just a lot more cooperative and willing and focused in general.
Mm. Yeah. And his tail's really starting to straighten out as well. He always used to hold it off quite significantly to the side, and now it's nearly, nearly smack bang in the center.
Isn't that amazing?
Mm.
Because the tail goes to one side because of chronic muscular contractions that we talked about through
Yeah.
his midline. And you may observe that when he plays with his tail a lot and it goes side to side and middle, that will
Hmm.
probably coincide with him trying to root and snatch the bit. Those two things will probably
Okay.
come like at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Hmm.
Yep.
But yeah, his tail looks softer in general, and you're right. It's much more often in the center.
Hmm.
Oh,
Yeah. Which is
my
good.
cat.
Yep.
She she does these
A bypass.
flybys now. Yeah, so funny. So, any questions? Because I wouldn't change what you're doing. The only thing I would look at is on the days that he stays forward on a circle, keep going until he loses forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And on the other
Yeah. So
day,
my,
if he stops once on the circle, I would keep going. If he stops twice on the circle, I'd probably go back to a straight line.
yeah. So my puppies have just gone crazy this morning. They're running
Oh,
around the house like wild. Um, the what was I going to say? Yeah, my aim is I do when I first start off, I do one lap around the arena and then straight on to the circles or squares, however kind of he
hmm.
feels. And then if he really struggles, then I just go back out large.
Perfect.
But if hopefully if he can cope, we'll just stay the whole time on the circles is the aim of
Yeah,
the
I
game.
think you're near that. You're right at this sort of massive transitional point with him. It's teetering there. He's not
Mhm.
quite there, but you're doing all the
Yeah.
right things. And like
Hmm.
for him, it almost feels like all of a sudden he goes from not being able to do circles to 5 to 10 to 15 minutes. Like it kind of leapfrogs at a certain point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and right now he's still teetering, so you'll get one day like you did, and then this day
Hmm.
where he goes, yeah, not so much. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the other day when I was he was going really well on the circle, he was so internal thinking about it all.
Yeah.
I could just see it on his face. He was, yeah, processing
Yes.
it all. Must have been thinking this feels pretty good.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that is the hardest part of rehab is you're starting with um, a habit in the nervous system of coordination that has brought them
Hmm.
to a point that's not working. And
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get from there to the first physical breakthrough is the hardest part. And then
Mm.
once you have that first substantial change of posture or change of movement, everything starts to get easier from there forward. But it's like that initial part is so delicate and difficult and tedious until you get the body kind of back to where it should be. And the horses go, Oh, this isn't the worst idea you ever had. It's actually kind of comfortable.
Yeah. Oh, she actually knows what she's trying to
Yeah,
do.
exactly. Because at first everything is hard. It's like even changing the balance isn't that comfortable. So it's just an
Yeah.
uphill battle until you hit the
Yeah.
first plateau and then it gets easier and faster.
Yeah, yeah. I think you'll be really pleased as well when you get to see Pablo next time. Well, as long as we're kind of progressing how we are. He's probably doing about the same as what we're doing with Stitch at a very
Excellent.
slow pace. But yeah, he's doing really well. And he's so cute. Pretty well 9 times out of 10 at the end of every lesson he'll give me a little nicker. As if, thanks, that was very good.
Don't you love that?
I know it's
I know,
adorable.
not
Yeah.
all horses do that, but the ones who do, I'm like, oh, that's like
Yeah, he's
that's
very
like
vocal.
finding a bouquet at your front door. It's just so nice.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's pretty cute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
had the knicker from Stitch yet. I don't know if that will come from him, but we'll see.
Yeah, not all horses
Yeah.
do it, but at first I thought it was kind of an Arabian thing, and then a lot of other different breeds did it, and I go, "Oh, it's just some horses do it, some don't."
Yeah, just a bit more vocal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he is very vocal anyway, so that's probably him. Whereas I don't think I've even heard, or maybe once or twice I've heard Stitch nicker,
Mm.
as in the paddock even. So he's not a big talker.
No, and if he does, it'll mean even more. But yeah,
Yeah.
he's what I'm also seeing, I forgot to point out, is I know I talked about that sort of lengthening of his body, but I think we've talked about before that healthy muscle development on a horse means we don't see lines of definition between muscle.
Yes, it looks
That's
smoother.
and that's how he's starting to look. There's a few lines here and there, but nothing
Yeah.
like when you started. You can't see the neck muscles all defined. You can't see every hind
Yeah.
quarter muscle all defined. So he's really
Yeah.
restored quite a bit of suppleness.
Yeah. It's funny because I always thought the opposite. I always thought that you should like see the muscle definition. It's
I know.
interesting, isn't it? Just,
I know.
but
It's
I mean, it
kind of,
makes sense as they,
we
yeah,
want
as
the
they let go of
horses to
holding
look
their
like,
muscles on.
yeah, we want them to look like they just came from Muscle Beach and that's not
Yeah,
healthy
muscle
muscle.
beach.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's like, nope, they're supposed to look like one big, smooth, sinewy, uh,
Yeah,
like a dancer, more like a dancer where you don't see all those kind of muscles.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Or a swimmer. Swimmers don't really have defined muscles, do they? Apart from
Oh
their big
yeah,
shoulders,
that's
but they
no,
they have
and
very supple muscles.
yeah, even if you look at any most athletic endeavors that involve movement and coordination, you'll have that
Mm-hmm.
muscle development that goes hand in hand. And if you're
Mm.
talking about power, like weightlifting, I go, there's no
Mm.
movement involved.
Yeah, yeah, okay,
So
yeah.
that's kind of a different muscle development for a different purpose.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean that swimmers are less powerful than a weightlifter. It's just a different type of
No,
strength.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it looks very green and summery there. We're brown and overcast today. It looks beautiful.
Yeah, today's nice and cool actually, so thank goodness. And a bit
Excellent.
cloudy. I like when it's a bit cloudy.
In the summer, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions with him? Anything else you want to look at?
No, I think that's all good. We'll just
Yeah.
keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I
And
still wouldn't change anything you're doing other than sort of the difference, like staying on the long reins, adding the bareback
mm-hmm,
pad. I don't think either
mm-hmm.
one of them is quite ready. I think you have both of them in the halter still, correct? Not the snaffle.
Yes.
Yeah. I wouldn't say
I
they're
don't
quite ready for the
and
snaffle.
no, and I don't know whether so both of them, you probably won't be surprised about this, but both of them have issues with the bit. I suppose maybe because of the whole riding piece. So I've got bitless bridles for them both. So maybe the transition piece when they're ready, it's just like a leather version, I
Hmm.
suppose, of what they're wearing now, and it's got it's side pulls.
Hmm.
Um, so it yeah
Well, then
could
it
transition
doesn't,
to that.
no, it doesn't matter because the only thing that becomes part of a training issue is if you're going
Hmm.
from a halter to a snaffle. Because
Yeah. Okay.
whether
Yep. Yep.
if you're in a bitless with a side pull, it's still the communication is going to come on the upper
On
jaw.
the nose. Yep.
And
Yep.
the
Yep.
only, like with a snaffle bit, it's just a change of force to the lower jaw. And some horses
Hmm.
react differently to that. And if they're out of balance, they hate the bit. So it's always better to start in the halter. But for some
Yeah.
horses, as they develop before you ride, we can look at them getting back in the snaffle,
Hmm.
if you want to do that. But I would go ahead and play with the bareback pad, the girthing, because I wouldn't change the training program, but anything creatively to start sort of moving the direction of riding gently
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
great. You can add in anything. And if you want to ride in a side pull, there's no need to, I mean, you can switch it from the halter, but it's not going to make that big of a difference.
Yeah. My aim if we progress to this is when I start writing them in bitless
Hmm.
and then get them going until I feel like they're doing really well and then try and then transition them to a snaffle and then see
Yeah.
if it changes matters too much. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if once the body is ready, the snaffle is no big deal. And
No.
horses that hate the bit and refuse to take the bit are usually telling us it's not
Mm.
working, it's not helping them, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but getting
Yeah.
the body back in shape doesn't require the bit.
No.
The bit
And
to me is
it's going to
only
be
a refinement. Like when you use
yeah,
a bit, you're just refining what you can feel. That's the only difference.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's going to be really interesting when we go down that track with Stitch because he was a classic of doing the roll curl, like right under. Is it what it's called, where they go behind the vertical?
Yeah.
He would always do that, tuck his head right in, and it's like you couldn't even find him. He'd just go like
Yeah.
instantly in there.
No,
So,
one of my horses came to me like that too. And the first 5 years I was riding him, I could not touch the reins. I could use the right rein or the left rein, but if I even tried to have a light rein contact, he just curled up like a bug, and that was it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I predict that's what we'll do a little bit with Stitch. I'd imagine. I'd
Well, it
imagine it would just go
actually,
into memory.
when I took the bit out of the equation completely, like you have, and I just rode him in
Hmm.
a halter and I worked him on the ground in a halter, that went away.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. Okay.
now I ride him in a snaffle, and it's very rare he has that reaction.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Good to know.
But
Yeah.
he could only do that once his body was strong enough.
Yeah. 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 It was all a symptom of everything else, wasn't it, previously?
Yeah.
Yeah. So no wonder he was in just a bit of a pickle, poor
Well,
boy.
and it can kind of become like we talked about if Stitch has a bit of a reaction to the bareback pad, it could be the memory of pain associated with something on his back. And it's the same
Hmm.
thing when you start with the bit again with a horse that overcurls their neck. It's like the
Hmm.
first layer you have to work through is that itself is the trigger.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you actually have to get them to carry it, but not use it for quite a while.
Yeah. 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 That's what I was
Mhm.
thinking of doing, like an interim. So ride them when I get riding, ride them, halt with sorry bitless, and then the next stage would be put the bit in their mouth but still use the bitless bridle, and then eventually then connect the reins to the bit.
Yeah,
That's my
or
plan.
depending on how they go, another option, and this worked very well for my horse, is working him like on the long reins from the halter, but put the bridle
Hmm.
on underneath. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
the bit is in the mouth, but you're never touching it. It's just
Hmm.
they're just carrying the bridle. And
Yes.
you're working off the halter, but they can have months of just learning to take the bit, carry the bit, take the bit out. And that sometimes
Yes.
works through the old triggers.
Yeah.
It's not as
Hmm.
big a deal that way. And that's how you start baby horses. You have them carry the bit for quite a long time before you use the reins.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
So lots to do. There's going to be more and more you can
I
play
know. I
around
know.
with. That's
I need to work
excellent.
part-time now so I can play more with my horses.
I know, right? We do what we
Yeah, it'd
can.
be nice. We
Yeah.
do. We do. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. And let me stop this. I
All
just want
right.
to set up an appointment with you.